Have you ever wondered why the path to mastery in markets is often paved with scars rather than trophies? Imagine this: a trader sits alone before the glow of shifting numbers, heart beating, not with the rhythm of opportunity, but with the echoes of past mistakes. Each green flicker promises redemption, each red flash threatens humiliation. Yet beneath the surface, deeper than profit and loss, there is a law older than Wall Street itself, the principle of pain. It is the crucible where illusions are burned away, where the ego collides with reality, and where the trader is either broken or reborn. Ray Dalio called it the formula of progress: pain plus reflection equals growth. But to the unconscious trader, pain feels like punishment, a reminder of inadequacy, an exposure of weakness. That is why most turn away, numbing themselves with distractions or chasing revenge trades to bury the wound under fresh noise. Yet the archetypal hero, the one who dares to enter the underworld of the psyche, understands that pain is not an enemy. It is the shadow guide, a dark teacher demanding humility. In Jungian language, pain is the confrontation with the shadow, the part of the self that longs for recognition yet terrifies the conscious ego. To deny it is to repeat the same mistakes endlessly. To face it is to transform. Consider how the Stoics spoke of fate. Seneca warned that fire tests gold, and adversity tests the strong. Marcus Aurelius whispered to himself that the obstacle is the way. The market, like life, operates on these timeless principles. Each loss is not merely a financial subtraction. It is a mirror held up to the soul, exposing impatience, arrogance, overconfidence, or fear. The untrained trader curses the market. The awakened trader studies the wound, asking, what part of my shadow demanded this loss? Was it the craving for control? The refusal to accept randomness? The addiction to being right rather than being disciplined? You, too, have faced this moment. That crushing loss that kept you awake at night. The silent rage when your perfect setup crumbled into dust. The hollow victory that left you emptier than before. Each time the market whispered the same riddle. Will you reflect, or will you repeat? Most repeat. They circle endlessly in cycles of greed and despair, never pausing long enough to ask what the pain was trying to teach. They want shortcuts, holy grails, signals that erase discomfort. But mastery is never found in ease. It is forged in the furnace of discomfort, shaped by the chisel of honest reflection. Dalio did not rise by avoiding pain. He embraced it. When Bridgewater collapsed in his early years, he faced humiliation so deep it stripped him of certainty. Yet in that collapse, he saw the truth. Mistakes were not to be hidden but dissected, studied, documented, reflected upon. Pain was not the end of the journey. It was the raw material of growth. What most traders fear, he sought. What most avoid, he turned into a principle. That is why his framework endures, because it is not merely economic, it is psychological alchemy. Do you see how this applies to you? Every time you recoil from the sting of failure, you deny yourself transformation. Every time you chase revenge trades, you bow to the shadow rather than confronting it. Every time you refuse to reflect, you condemn yourself to repeat. The market is not cruel. It is indifferent. It mirrors back exactly what you bring to it: fear, greed, vanity, or discipline. If you bring noise, it will amplify noise. If you bring stillness, it will reward clarity. But stillness is not gifted. It is earned through repeated encounters with pain, each time choosing reflection instead of denial. The principle of pain is therefore not about suffering for suffering's sake. It is about conversion. The loss that makes you humble instead of reckless. The failure that makes you cautious but not paralyzed. The setback that refines your patience until you trade not from impulse but from wisdom. Pain is the tuition the market charges for truth, and reflection is the only currency that redeems it. Think of the archetype of the alchemist. He takes base metal, ugly and unrefined, and through fire transforms it into gold. The trader must do the same with inner wounds. The fire is pain, the process is reflection, the outcome is mastery. Yet beware, those who avoid the fire remain forever trapped in leaden habits, repeating errors as though cursed by fate. The principle is clear. If you resist pain, it multiplies. If you embrace it, it liberates. Now ask yourself honestly, what has pain been trying to teach you? Not yesterday, not last year, but now. What mistake repeats like a ghost in your trading journal? What shadow lurks beneath your strategy? Until you name it, it owns you. Until you reflect, it binds you. But once you embrace it, you begin to glimpse the freedom Dalio spoke of, the freedom of principles born in fire, guiding not only trades, but the very architecture of a disciplined life. Most traders enter the arena of markets, believing that skill alone will guarantee their ascent. They believe charts, algorithms, and carefully crafted strategies will protect them from chaos. Yet the market has a way of dissolving these illusions with ruthless efficiency. It pierces the armor of intellect, exposing the vulnerable flesh of emotion beneath. It is here, in the collision of theory and reality, that the principle of pain reveals its merciless necessity. For no trader, however brilliant, escapes the sting of defeat. It is universal, the unspoken rite of passage in a world where probability reigns and certainty is an illusion. Ray Dalio's journey was marked by this confrontation. Early triumphs inflated his confidence until it reached a breaking point. In 1982, he bet heavily on a depression that never came. The result was catastrophic: financial collapse, public humiliation, and the humbling reality of borrowing money from his father just to survive. This was more than financial pain. It was psychic disintegration. The persona of invincibility shattered, and in its ruins, he stood face to face with his shadow. Jung would call this the meeting with the unconscious, that harrowing encounter where the ego realizes it is not the master, but a fragile construct forever tested by forces larger than itself. The unreflective trader, when faced with such collapse, retreats into bitterness or denial. He blames the market, blames manipulation, blames everything except the untrained impulses within. He tightens his grip on control, doubling down on flawed patterns, desperate to restore the illusion of dominance. And yet, every attempt at avoidance only tightens the noose. Pain ignored becomes pain compounded. Reflection postponed becomes destiny repeated. What Dalio discovered, and what few dare to accept, is that the only way through is surrender. Not surrender to defeat, but surrender to truth. You may recognize this in your own story. How many times have you repeated the same mistake, convincing yourself it was different this time? How many nights have you replayed a loss, unable to silence the voice of regret? You know the feeling, the stomach sinking as your position unravels, the heat rising in your chest, the urge to intervene, to fix, to force the outcome. And yet, the more you chase, the deeper you fall. The pain was never the enemy. The enemy was your refusal to sit with it, to let it illuminate the shadow that drove you to act. Discipline does not grow in the absence of suffering. It grows in the dialogue between wound and wisdom. The Stoics knew this intimately. Epictetus, born a slave, taught that freedom is found not in escaping hardship, but in mastering one's response to it. The market tests the same principle. You cannot dictate its storms, but you can dictate your sails. You cannot prevent loss, but you can prevent the ego's tantrum that follows. Each red candle on a chart can either be a lash of cruelty or a teacher's hand. The choice lies not in the market, but in you. Pain is inevitable. Whether it becomes suffering or strength depends on reflection. Archetypally, the trader who refuses reflection is the fool, impulsive, reckless, blind to the abyss. He leaps again and again, only to be devoured by the same beast. But the trader who reflects enters the path of the sage. He studies his wounds like sacred texts. He maps his errors until they reveal patterns, truths about himself more profound than any technical indicator. This is how Dalio built Bridgewater's culture of radical transparency, by institutionalizing reflection, by treating mistakes not as shameful secrets, but as treasures of wisdom. In doing so, he transformed pain into a collective weapon of progress, a ritual of growth shared by all who dared to face the mirror. Consider how this principle can reshape your path. Imagine every loss you have ever endured, not as wasted suffering, but as raw material waiting to be refined. Imagine your worst mistake, the one that haunts you still, transformed into the cornerstone of your discipline. Imagine seeing pain not as a curse, but as a compass pointing directly to the weakness that must be confronted. The alchemy is real. What you resist persists, but what you embrace transforms. Reflection is not passive. It is not wallowing in regret. It is an active confrontation, a disciplined dissection of cause and effect. Why did you enter too early? Why did you size too large? Why did you hold too long? Beneath each question lies a psychological trigger: fear of missing out, hunger for validation, terror of being wrong. To confront these is to engage in shadow work, the process Jung described as integrating the parts of yourself that the ego rejects. In the trading realm, this means admitting that you are not immune to greed, not above fear, not beyond folly. Only when you embrace these truths do you begin to cultivate mastery. Dalio's formula, pain plus reflection equals progress, is deceptively simple, but behind its elegance lies an eternal law. Pain without reflection is torment. Reflection without pain is theory. Together, they are transformation. Together, they are the crucible in which the trader is remade. You may not control the market's storms, but you can control whether those storms erode you or strengthen you. That choice, though difficult, defines the boundary between mediocrity and mastery. And so the question lingers: when the market wounds you next, will you recoil and deny, or will you embrace and reflect? Will you scatter into blame and revenge, or will you stand still, allowing the sting to carve wisdom into your being? The answer will determine not only your performance, but your evolution. For the principle of pain is not about avoiding fire. It is about learning to walk through it and emerge forged. Most traders believe that pain is temporary, that once endured, it will vanish into memory like a passing storm. Yet the truth is more unsettling. Pain lingers. It embeds itself into the unconscious, shaping behaviors, distorting perceptions, whispering commands from the shadows. A trader who has been burned by loss often carries that scar into every decision thereafter. He hesitates when opportunity arises, fearing a repetition of the wound, or he overcompensates, swinging with reckless aggression in an attempt to erase the shame of hesitation. In both cases, the past has seized the present, and the trader becomes enslaved by ghosts rather than guided by wisdom. Ray Dalio's principle of pain demands more than simple endurance. It requires excavation. To reflect is to dig into the unconscious, to unearth the hidden archetypes that drive behavior in ways unseen. Jung spoke of complexes, emotional knots buried deep, activated by specific triggers. For traders, these knots are often tied around themes of worth, control, and fear. One trader may feel unworthy of success and sabotage himself, just as profits bloom. Another may fear uncertainty so intensely that he clutches at false certainties, ignoring evidence until ruin arrives. These complexes do not vanish with surface strategies. They reveal themselves only through honest confrontation, through the discipline of reflection when pain cracks the surface. And yet, most resist this confrontation. It is easier to blame the system, to blame volatility, to blame external forces, than to admit that the battlefield is within. But what happens when you avoid this inner work? The archetype of the addict emerges. He craves the thrill of the next trade, the dopamine rush of temporary wins, the fleeting sense of control. Losses become unbearable, so he masks them with more trades, more risk, more chaos. Like a moth circling fire, he cannot stop until he is consumed. Pain avoided becomes obsession, and obsession becomes destruction. Dalio's story diverged because he chose the path of the warrior scholar. He treated pain not as a signal to flee, but as a summons to study. His radical transparency was not simply an organizational policy, it was shadow work institutionalized. He forced himself and those around him to face mistakes without disguise, to dissect them without ego, to learn with brutal honesty. This was not cruelty, it was discipline. Just as the Stoics advised the stripping away of illusion to face reality as it is, Bridgewater culture aimed at stripping away the masks that shielded the ego. For in markets, as in life, reality does not care for your pride. It will expose every weakness, whether you are ready or not. You, too, must decide which path you follow. When you encounter pain, will you mask it with denial, or will you use it as a scalpel to cut into your own unconscious? Reflection is uncomfortable. It forces you to admit truths you would rather ignore, that you were greedy, that you were fearful, that you were desperate for validation. But this discomfort is the gateway. Each admission is a key, unlocking the patterns that once held you captive. To walk the path of mastery is to become your own analyst, your own philosopher, your own surgeon of the psyche. Pain is not here to destroy you. It is here to dismantle the false layers of ego, so that something stronger, clearer, more resilient can emerge. Think of the archetype of the phoenix. It burns, reduced to ash by flames it cannot escape, and yet, from those ashes, it rises anew, more radiant than before. The trader who embraces Dalio's principle follows this same cycle. Each loss is a burning, each reflection is the collection of ashes. Each new strategy, shaped by wisdom, is the rebirth. Over time, the scars no longer dictate hesitation or recklessness. They become inscriptions of discipline etched into the soul. This is the paradox. The more you embrace pain, the less power it holds. The more you resist, the more enslaved you become. Performance psychology echoes the same truth. Trauma left unexamined becomes a silent saboteur. Athletes, soldiers, and traders alike discover that past failures resurface at the most critical moments, paralyzing action or fueling destructive impulses. The cure is not avoidance, but exposure. To sit with the discomfort, to analyze it without judgment, to extract lessons until the wound is no longer raw, but woven into resilience. Dalio Progress Formula is therefore not merely a tool for markets, it is a model for life. Pain plus reflection equals growth. In wealth, in wisdom, in self-mastery, ask yourself, which pains still own you? Is it the devastating loss that shattered your confidence years ago? Is it the humiliation of being wrong in front of peers? Is it the gnawing fear that you will never be enough, no matter how much you win? These pains are not barriers, they are portals. Each one is an invitation to step deeper into yourself, to confront the archetypes that rule you, to reclaim sovereignty over your mind. Without reflection, they will repeat. With reflection, they will transform. So the next time the market humbles you, resist the urge to lash out. Do not retreat into denial. Do not plunge into revenge. Instead, pause. Ask, what truth is this pain revealing about me? Sit with the answer, however uncomfortable. Write it down. Reflect until clarity dawns. For in that process, you do not merely recover from a loss. You ascend. You begin to embody the principle Dalio built his empire upon. The understanding that pain is the greatest teacher, if only you dare to listen. Pain has a peculiar way of stripping away illusions. It dismantles the stories you tell yourself about control, certainty, and superiority. In the heat of a loss, the masks fall. You no longer see yourself as the invincible strategist, the chosen one destined for victory. Instead, you meet the raw self, fragile, fearful, aching to escape discomfort. This is where many retreat, unable to face the mirror. Yet those who stay, those who endured the discomfort without fleeing, discover something extraordinary. Pain does not merely reveal weakness, it reveals truth. Ray Dalio discovered this truth when his empire of conviction collapsed under the weight of reality. He believed he understood the system, that his analysis was unshakable, that his predictions were sound. But the market exposed the hubris, reducing him to near ruin. The humiliation of being so publicly wrong did not destroy him, it purified him. It forced him to abandon the illusion of certainty and embrace the humility of principles. From that crucible emerged one of the most disciplined frameworks in the history of finance. Pain was not the end, it was the beginning of wisdom. The Jungian archetypes speak clearly here. When the hero faces failure, he either devolves into the tyrant, raging against fate, grasping for control, lashing out at the world, or he transforms into the sage, integrating shadow into consciousness, accepting limits, and wielding humility as strength. Most traders, when beaten by the market, become tyrants. They rage, they force trades, they cling to illusions of revenge. But the few who embrace pain as initiation enter the realm of the sage. They see each wound as a teacher, each setback as a hidden gift. Dalio's principle of pain, distilled to its essence, is nothing less than the hero's initiation into wisdom. And yet, reflection requires more than memory. It requires brutal honesty. How often do you disguise your mistakes under convenient narratives? The market was manipulated. It was just bad luck. My system was fine. The timing was off. These rationalizations shield the ego, but they rob you of growth. Pain demands you confront the deeper truth, that your psychology, not the market, is the battleground. Reflection without honesty is self-deception, and self-deception ensures repetition. You must strip away the excuses until you stand naked before the fact. You chose wrongly. You acted rashly. You ignored evidence. You surrendered to impulse. This is not shame. This is liberation. Only when you own your shadow can you shape it into strength. The Stoics understood this as the art of control. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the mind adapts and converts to its own purposes the obstacles to its acting. The impediment to action becomes the action. The obstacle becomes the way. Pain is the obstacle. Reflection is the conversion. Growth is the result. This is not philosophy for the ivory tower. It is survival for the trading floor. Every setback can either corrode you with bitterness or fortify you with wisdom. The difference lies in whether you dare to reflect. Imagine your last painful trade. Picture it vividly. Recall the moment when the screen glared red, when your stomach tightened, when your mind began crafting stories to escape the blow. Now pause. Instead of burying it, dissect it. What fear drove you? What greed whispered in your ear? What ego blinded you to risk? Each answer is a shard of shadow, a piece of yourself you must reclaim. Reflection gathers these shards and forges them into clarity. Without this work, you remain fragmented, tossed between extremes of euphoria and despair. With it, you become whole, balanced, capable of facing the market with equanimity. Dalio institutionalized this process because he understood its necessity. At Bridgewater, mistakes were not swept under the rug. They were documented, analyzed, and shared openly. Pain was not hidden, it was illuminated. In this way, the collective shadow was integrated, transforming the culture into one of relentless self-examination. This radical transparency was not cruelty. It was compassion in its highest form, because it refused to let individuals stagnate in illusion. It demanded reflection, and through reflection, it demanded growth. You may not run a hedge fund, but you can build your own culture of radical honesty. Your journal can become your mirror. Your review process can become your forge. Instead of treating pain as a private shame, treat it as sacred data. Every loss is information about yourself, about your habits, your impulses, your hidden archetypes. If you are brave enough to reflect without flinching, you will discover that the market is not your adversary. It is your teacher. Its lessons are written in pain, but its rewards are written in growth. The paradox emerges again. The more you resist pain, the more it rules you. The more you embrace it, the freer you become. Traders who fear pain are trapped in cycles of avoidance, chasing wins to escape discomfort, hiding from truths that demand change. Traders who embrace pain are liberated, for they see losses not as death, but as rebirth. Pain becomes the doorway to individuation, to the integration of shadow and self, to the transformation of chaos into clarity. So ask yourself now, will you continue to resist, clinging to illusions that keep you bound? Or will you step into the fire, reflect with honesty, and emerge transformed? The choice is yours, but the principle remains the same. Pain plus reflection equals growth. Ignore it, and you remain enslaved. Embrace it, and you step onto the path of mastery. Pain is the crucible where the trader's illusions burn away, but reflection is the vessel that carries those ashes into wisdom. Without reflection, pain is merely suffering, a wound that festers, breeding resentment and fear. With reflection, pain becomes transformation, the alchemy by which chaos is distilled into clarity. Ray Dalio principle is deceptively simple, yet it conceals a depth as vast as any philosophy. Pain plus reflection equals growth. It is not a formula of numbers, it is a formula of character. Consider what happens when a trader does not reflect. He loses, feels the sting, and then seeks escape. Sometimes it is revenge trading, sometimes it is reckless doubling down, sometimes it is withdrawal into despair. Each reaction is avoidance, a refusal to sit with the discomfort long enough to see its lesson. The shadow archetype emerges again here, the trickster. He whispers lies to the trader. It was not your fault, it was chance. There is no lesson to learn. And so the trader repeats, dancing endlessly with the same mistake, blindfolded by his own refusal to see. The trickster thrives where reflection is absent. But when reflection enters, the alchemy begins. Pain is held, examined, dissected. The trader journals his emotions, traces the chain of decisions, uncovers the hidden impulses that drove him. He admits the greed that swelled in his chest, the fear that tightened his grip, the pride that silenced his doubt. Each admission is a fragment of shadow made conscious. Jung taught that individuation, the path to wholeness, requires integration of these fragments. By reflecting on pain, the trader integrates his shadow. By integrating, he becomes less reactive, less bound by unseen forces, more aligned with clarity. The fire that once destroyed now purifies. Dalio's genius was not merely surviving his collapse, but institutionalizing this process. He understood that humans, left alone, rarely reflect deeply enough. The ego resists, preferring denial to exposure. So he created a culture where reflection was mandatory, where mistakes were logged, dissected, and shared. Pain was democratized, reflection was normalized, growth was accelerated. Bridgewater became not just a hedge fund, but a laboratory of human behavior, a collective enactment of Jungian shadow work in the financial realm. Each mistake, no matter how costly, became fuel for progress. Each failure became a stepping stone toward mastery. You may not have such a culture around you, but you can create one within yourself. Reflection is a discipline. It demands ritual. Perhaps it is the daily journal, where you record not only what you traded, but what you felt. Perhaps it is the weekly review, where you trace patterns of behavior across many trades, identifying the archetypes that dominate your actions. Perhaps it is meditation, where you sit with the discomfort of loss without reacting, allowing it to teach you patience. Reflection is not passive, it is active engagement with the self. It is the work of a warrior scholar, one who wields both sword and pen, both courage and curiosity. The Stoics offer guidance here as well. Seneca urged the practice of evening reflection, asking what one did well, what one did poorly, what could be improved. Marcus Aurelius filled his meditations with observations of his own failings, writing as though to a future self who must rise above them. This is not self-condemnation, it is self-cultivation. Pain is not avoided, it is absorbed into wisdom. The market provides you the same opportunity, if you dare to use it. Each red day, each stop out, each failure is not a verdict, but a teacher's note. The question is whether you will read it. Imagine the archetype of the alchemist again. He does not curse the lead for being impure. He does not deny its heaviness, its dullness, its resistance. Instead, he works with it. He subjects it to fire. He studies its reactions. He transforms it patiently, methodically, until gold emerges. Pain is your lead. Reflection is your fire. Growth is your gold. The alchemy is slow, demanding patience and perseverance, but it is inevitable for those who stay the course. Each loss becomes lighter, not because it hurts less, but because it teaches more. Each wound becomes wisdom, etched into your psyche as resilience. And so, the trader who reflects begins to change. His relationship with pain evolves. He no longer fears it as punishment, nor seeks to escape it with denial. He welcomes it as feedback, as raw truth delivered without bias. The fear of failure diminishes, because failure itself becomes a guide. The obsession with being right fades, because being wrong is no longer a death sentence, but a lesson. The ego softens. Pride gives way to humility. Impulsiveness gives way to patience. This is not the end of pain, but it is the end of slavery to pain. The trader becomes free, not because he controls the market, but because he controls his response to it. Now ask yourself, when pain next arrives, will you treat it as an enemy or as an ally? Will you run from it, or will you sit with it until it reveals its message? Will you allow the trickster to deceive you, or will you embody the alchemist, turning loss into wisdom? The answer will determine the arc of your journey. For Dalio, principle is not merely financial strategy, it is psychological destiny. Pain plus reflection equals growth. Ignore it, and you spiral. Embrace it, and you ascend. There comes a point when the trader, scarred yet wiser, realizes that the market was never the true opponent. The battle was always within. The charts were mirrors, the losses were teachers, the wins were temptations, and the market itself was a stage upon which the psyche enacted its eternal drama. Ray Dalio, Principle of Pain, illuminated this truth. Growth is not the elimination of discomfort, but the transformation of it. Pain plus reflection equals growth, a law as immutable as gravity, and as liberating as fire. The inner storm that once raged with every fluctuation begins to quiet. Reflection transforms the relationship with volatility. The trader no longer interprets red candles as personal insults, nor green surges as personal validation. Each outcome is simply data, a fragment of reality, neutral until the mind assigns meaning. This detachment is not indifference, it is strength. It is the Stoic posture of Marcus Aurelius, who reminded himself that external events do not wound the soul unless the soul chooses to be wounded. The market does not betray you, it reveals you. Once you accept this, you begin to trade, not for revenge, not for ego, not for the desperate pursuit of validation, but for alignment with reality itself. Reflection deepens until it becomes instinctive. Losses trigger not tantrums, but inquiry. Wins inspire not arrogance, but curiosity. Every trade becomes less about outcome and more about process, less about external reward and more about internal mastery. Jung would describe this as individuation. the integration of shadow and self into a balanced whole. The trader who once oscillated violently between fear and greed now walks a narrower path, steady, aware, unshaken by extremes. He has not eradicated the shadow, but befriended it. He has not silenced pain, but listened to it. In doing so, he becomes something rare, a trader who is free. Dalio's journey reflects this freedom. From humiliation and collapse, he forged principles that transcended trading, principles that shaped decision-making, relationships, and life itself. This is the ultimate revelation of the principle of pain. It does not apply only to markets. It applies to existence. Every setback in life carries the same formula. Pain plus reflection equals growth. The failed venture, the broken relationship, the humbling mistake, each is an opportunity to integrate, to ascend, to be remade. Trading, in this sense, is a microcosm of the human condition, a concentrated arena where the psyche confronts itself daily. Now you must confront the final question. What do you truly seek in trading? Is it money alone? If so, pain will feel cruel, and reflection will feel unnecessary. You will chase, you will avoid, you will suffer endlessly. But if you seek mastery, of mind, of discipline, of self, then pain becomes indispensable. It becomes your greatest ally. Each wound carves wisdom into your being. Each failure builds resilience. Each reflection polishes the mirror until you see clearly not only the market, but yourself. Wealth may follow, but it is no longer the prize. The true prize is sovereignty over your own mind. Imagine the archetype of the monk warrior. He walks into battle not with frenzy, but with calm. He does not fear the enemy, for he has mastered himself. He accepts pain as part of the path, reflection as part of the ritual, growth as part of the destiny. In this archetype lies the image of the trader who has completed the journey. He is no longer enslaved by the storms of emotion. He trades with clarity, detached yet engaged, disciplined yet flexible. He has learned that the mind, once conquered, renders the market powerless to destroy him. This is where you, too, must arrive. Detachment is not the absence of feeling, but the presence of mastery. When you no longer measure yourself by wins and losses, when you no longer need the market to affirm your worth, when you no longer fear the sting of pain because you know it is the gateway to growth, then you are free. You no longer chase the illusion of control. You embody the reality of discipline. You no longer oscillate between hubris and despair. You dwell in the stillness between them, steady as stone, fluid as water. This is the rebirth the principle of pain offers, a freedom not from volatility, but from enslavement to it, a wealth not of numbers, but of clarity, a victory not over the market, but over the mind. And in that victory, every chart, every trade, every outcome becomes secondary to the deeper triumph, the transformation of self. The trader who conquers the mind has already conquered the market.